Shut up and sit down.
Hello, my name's Holly. Welcome to Suspense She Shed Sunday, where I have true crime right in my murder she shed every Sunday and Wednesday. Wednesday we have Wacky World Wednesday. So make sure you guys hit like and subscribe so you can get all my true crime content. All right, before I started, usually I tell a rhyme to you guys, but today I'm going to be a little bit serious. I just want to tell you guys I am so happy. I've got all these new subscribers lately. 99% of you are super kind. I have those that do not like the sound of my voice, and there will be some people that don't. If I'm not your cup of tea, don't subscribe, move on. I am here because I was a victim of sexual assault as a young child, 7 years old. And I just want some of these victims out here, even though if they're no longer with us, just to find some kind of justice. I want their voice to be heard over and over again. I want to help people. If anything I said, make people more aware of their surroundings and make them feel safer, then I just want to do that for someone. So, like I said, there's a billion crime channels. I make absolutely nothing from my true crime content. And I spend hours researching it. I try to get different crime cases that don't often get the notoriety as some do. Those victims to find their justice as well. It's not fair just to focus on the main people that get focused on over and over again. So what I'm saying is you guys are great, the ones that subscribed. I love y'all. Y'all have been so good. Even though through the negative comments, I sometimes get discouraged. I'm not going to lie. But it's worth it. It's worth it if I can help one person out there. Just move on if you don't like it. Guys, let's get started. This was a cold case. I love when cold cases get solved. It's the most amazing thing when the victim finally finds justice, or the victim's family. This was a brutal, cruel murder that occurred in 1994. Stacy Falcon Dewey was a beautiful woman, a single woman with a 3-year-old son named Jacob. On the day of October 23rd, 1994, Stacy was turning 23 years old, and she decided to drive with her boyfriend Rich and her son Jacob, who was 3 years old, to surprise her mom, Vianne, who lived about 2 hours away from Renton, where they lived. Her mother lived in the southwest part of Washington. Vianne had raised Stacy on her own. Stacy's father had abandoned her and her brother when they were just little. So Vianne worked hard as a waitress and other odd jobs, just trying to take care of her children on her own. I can't even imagine being a single mother. I think that would be so hard. It was hard enough when it was both me and my husband when we raised our boys. They're grown now, but I can't imagine it'd be an extremely hard job, and I give you single mothers praise for that. That's amazing. Her daughter Stacy had met Jacob's dad, who was her son, John Dewey, when he was friends with her brother, and she got pregnant, and then they married. But their marriage, unfortunately, did not last very long. After driving to her mom's, they got out and they drove their Buick down the street because they didn't want her mom to see their car. They got out, they walked up to her mom's house, and Vianne answered the door, and when she answered it, little Jacob was so glad to see his Grammy. He gave her a hug. He hugged her, and the first thing he said to her was, "Grammy, Mommy says I got tood." Vianne knew that meant attitude, and she stated tood is a good thing. and he definitely had plenty of that, she said. After Stacy got there, they decided they'd go out and play pool for her birthday. So they dropped Jacob off at a great aunt's house, and Vian said they had an amazing night together that night. But who would have thought it would have been the last time Vian would see her daughter and grandson? Horrible. Just 5 days later, it would be the worst day of Vian's life. The early morning light had just broke when a Seattle Times delivery person was out making his usual deliveries. He stumbled up on a woman and her young son in the middle of the road. And it was a dead-end road. They were covered in blood. He immediately called 911. When the police arrived, they quickly discovered that both had been shot in the head. They were lying there fully clothed, almost as if they were huddled together as they lay there. A brown 4-door Buick was parked next to their bodies. Their shoes, 3 white buttons, a brown glove, and a coiled-up strip of packing tape lay among dozens of items scattered around the car. The weapon used in the murders has not been recovered. Police say there were signs of a struggle at the scene based on evidence collected. For example, some of the contents of Stacy's bag were scattered throughout the vehicle, including her purse. The car keys appeared to have fallen between the driver's seat and the door, and they weren't even readily visible because they were slipped in between the crack. People who live near that area said they heard screams and gunshots that night, but they just assumed it was the local kids having a party. It started raining pretty quick after the officers got there, so they just grabbed a tarp and put it over the 2 bodies and part of the car. For the next few hours, glove detectives meticulously documented and bagged dozens of items of evidence. They found shell casings inside and outside the car. They noticed something strange about the shoeless victims. The boy's socks were white, and the woman's were caked with mud and leaves. She also had a nasty gash on her head and bruises around her neck and arm. A grassy patch next to the passenger's side appeared trampled. The officers could not figure out the motive. There was no sign of sexual assault, and all of her valuables were left behind. And you knew it was Stacy and her son Jacob. They quickly learned that she had worked as a cocktail waitress and had divorced Jacob's dad a couple of years earlier. She did live with her boyfriend Rich, and as in all crimes, the men in her life became suspects. Although both men's lie detectors came back inconclusive, they both had alibis. Rich told detectives that Stacy had gone out with friends on her night off from work while he was at a local tavern near her apartment. Rich stated that he had went to Stacy's place and crashed there, planning to meet her when she returned home that night. But she and Jake never showed that night. Strangely enough, that night before the bodies were found, a man had showed up at the ER, howling angel dust and acting just crazy out of control. And he also had a blood-stained shirt on. Investigators thought that was quite odd, but his story actually checked out. He stated that he had been in a fight with his girlfriend. Vian was working at Donna's Espresso and Cafe, where I told you she was a manager, when the police chief showed up and just bluntly told her, "Your daughter and grandson were murdered last night." She couldn't believe the police chief had told her in such a blunt manner. That would be terribly hard. Said that she just took off running out of the restaurant. She was so upset. She just ran and cried. I can't even imagine. That would be horrible to find out. Detectives learned Stacy had dropped off Jake at the babysitter's apartment. then arrived at, a club at 9:30 and stayed with friends for an hour. Then she went to 2 more clubs, leaving the last one about 1 a.m. to pick up Jake. On the way to the babysitter's, Stacy stopped to buy beef jerky at 7-Eleven. I guess she wanted a snack. Surveillance videos captured her with an unidentified white male about 1:20 a.m. at that store. 15 minutes later, Stacy arrived at the Kenton Ridge Apartments where she picked up Jake from the babysitter. The babysitter would be the last person to see Stacy and little Jake alive. Phone records showed Stacy had received an incoming call just a few hours before she was killed. It came from a number that traced back to a Des Moines man. His name was Scott Holm. Holm, 27, volunteered to talk with detectives. He told them he was home with his wife during the time frame Stacy and Jake were killed. Scott did admit he had been cheating on his wife, casually dating Stacy after meeting her several months earlier when she waited his table at a restaurant. Scott had been taking early morning classes at Green River Community College, carpooling to school with a friend. His alibi seemed solid. Stacy did not know Scott was married when they started seeing each other, and as soon as she found out, she broke up with him. But they were still friendly. They still talked to each other. A few days after the police had interviewed Scott, this is crazy, but Scott's body was found in the back of an abandoned truck. He had been murdered. He had been choked and repeatedly stabbed. It would soon be learned that a weightlifting buddy named Vince was the cause of his death. Scott had installed some car speakers for Vince and came to his place to collect the money. Vince owed him for the speakers, so he wanted to get his money back. Detectives interviewed Vince's girlfriend at the couple's apartment. She told them she wasn't home most of the day on November 8th, but when she returned, she found blood stains on the carpet. The police would also soon learn that Scott's credit card had been stolen and Vinny had taken it after killing Scott to pay for new furniture in order to replace the old furniture that had gotten blood all over it when he had killed Scott. That has to be the lowest of the lows. Kill a friend over speakers, then steal his credit card because he had the audacity to get blood on your furniture? Wow. That blows my mind. Vince finally admitted to killing Scott. He came up with the wildest story about it being in self-defense. Vince claimed he and Scott had been in business together. Scott was supplying him large amounts of marijuana to sell. On the day he killed Scott, he claimed Scott called to tell him detectives had questioned him about a woman's death in Renton. Scott had described the woman as someone with whom he had been having an affair. Vince said that Scott told him that she had threatened that if Scott didn't leave his wife, she would tell her about the affair, as well as inform police about the marijuana trafficking. So, he said that Scott told him that he viewed the woman as a threat. He did what he had to do to protect himself, and that he cleaned the woman's clock, according to what Vince says. Vince also claimed that this murder confession made him fear for his life. When Scott showed up at his apartment, Vince claimed Scott demanded the drug money and pulled a gun. Vince said he struggled with Scott. The gun fell onto the kitchen floor and fired a round. Vince said he then grabbed a kitchen knife and repeatedly stabbed Scott. Investigators did not really believe his story, but they held on to it as a possible theory. But it paid off for Vince in court because he ended up being charged with second-degree murder instead of first. In 2002, DNA evidence that was found at the scene of the crime was sent to a lab, and they came back with their suspect in 2002. His name was Jerome Jones. Then, Stacy's mom is upset because she did not even realize they had found DNA evidence and doesn't understand why charges are just now being made against Jerome Jones. I agree with her on that. That's crazy. 2002. She stated, "I am ecstatic that my daughter and grandson are finally going to get the justice that they so deserve. Now I will finally have some good news to take to her at the cemetery. That will be a time for celebration for sure," she said. As far as Jerome Jones, he's had a long history of street gangs, drugs, and violence. In 1986, at the age of 16, Rome Dog, as he was known on the street, already had earned his first felony conviction for attempted robbery. By 18, he was serving time in a California prison for carjacking and shooting a man. 3 years later, after being paroled, Jones grabbed a produce truck at gunpoint and was sent back to prison for another year. So he's been floating in and out of prison for a while. His first arrest in Washington came 4 months after his release from a California prison in 1993. Seattle police chased down Jones after he bolted from a traffic stop one August night in the Central District. As he fled, Jones tossed away a blue bandana and a baggie with 12 grams of cocaine. Jones completed his 2-month sentence in the King County Jail for the resulting felony drug conviction. Jones is currently serving prison time for a murder, and not Stacy's. It's a different murder. He is currently in prison serving time for the murder of Gregory Hebden from Irvine, California, who was a businessman and father of 2 young children. Then only learned about the DNA evidence in 2019. They had it in 2002. She just learned in 2019. That's crazy. The way she learned is crazy as well. A reporter told her, who had been investigating the cold case. A reporter. He asked her if she knew about the DNA evidence linking Jerome Jones to the crimes. Vian was speechless and totally shocked that no one had told her about the DNA evidence. Due to sloppy police work and lack of funding for this cold case, they had sat for years with nothing done. And I guess since they figured, well, Jones was already in prison anyway, so they just didn't do much about it. This is horrible. But Jones bound Stacy, beat her, orally raped her, and likely shot Jacob to death in front of her before he killed her. Can you imagine watching your child get shot right in front of your eyes? They say it's probably likely that Stacy was holding Jake at the time that he was shot because a bullet passed through the boy and penetrated Stacy's shoulder. A semen stain had also been found on little Jacob's jacket. Stacy was trying to protect her little boy to the end. Vian is just glad her daughter and grandson will finally see some kind of justice. Jones is now finally being charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder for the deaths of Stacy and Jacob after more than 27 years, guys. Although it could have been solved long before now. But it's finally going to happen. And I'm so happy for the family that they're going to get some sort of justice. I'll show a little clip of Finn.
Washington State Patrol Crime Lab detected DNA evidence on Stacy through an oral swab and fingernail clippings that matched a man named Jerome Jones. Falcon says she didn't know DNA evidence existed until many years later in 2019 through a local Seattle Times journalist.
We were flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it that they had all that time to get a hold of any one of us and let us know, and they hadn't contacted anybody.
The 51-year-old suspect is currently behind bars in a California state prison for shooting a man to death in March of 1995, which is just months after allegedly killing Stacy and Jacob in Washington state. Court documents say a number of additional evidence items were submitted and resubmitted over the years, given advances in DNA identification.
Because it's pretty embarrassing for them to have sat on this DNA for 18 years and not done anything.
In December 2021, investigators learned DNA evidence was also found on the jacket of Falcon's 3-year-old grandson.
I'm so embarrassed when I go up to the graveside. I told her I'd have some good news for her. Well, that was like 15, 20 years ago. And now I do have good news for her.
And I'm so glad you guys joined me today. And I hope you come back for Wacky World Wednesday. I truly am so excited to have you guys to come on. I only started my channel like 2 months ago. And so I am just feel so blessed with the subscribers. Y'all have a blessed week, a blessed day. And I hope only the best for y'all. And just stay safe out there. Sometimes we live in a crazy world. All right, bye. And y'all come back and see me now, you hear?